You're listening to Tremendous Leadership with Dr. Tracey Jones.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tremendous Leadership Leaders on Leadership podcast, where we pull back the curtain on leadership and talk to leaders from all ages and stages about what it takes to pay the price of leadership. And today, our guest is the one, the only, the tremendous Mike Ettore. Mike, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation, Dr. Tracey. I'm pleased to be here, thrilled to be here, actually.
Thanks, Mike. And Mike and I only recently connected earlier. I think it was earlier this month. I got an email from his site when I was in Israel requesting that I be on his podcast. And we're going to talk about Mike and his message and his podcast and what he's doing for leaders at the end of the show. But of course, I agreed. And then after I heard all about his leadership chops, I knew I had to have him on our podcast. So let me tell you a little bit about Mike. Mike has served in leadership roles for over 45 years. He's earned a reputation for being an exceptionally effective leader and is known for achieving superior results in a wide range of challenging environments. In addition to having retired as a Marine Corps infantry officer and decorated combat leader, he also served successfully as a C-suite executive in K-Force Incorporated, a publicly traded professional services firm with an annual revenue in excess of $1 billion. So you're going to get some military leadership and definitely some C-suite leadership. Over the course of his Marine Corps and business careers, Mike was highly regarded for being an exceptionally effective mentor and developer of leaders. After retiring from K-Force in 2013, Mike founded Fidelis Leadership Group and has devoted himself to his greatest passion, helping others develop into world-class leaders. He has successfully coached and mentored executives and senior leaders from a wide range of industries and is sought after for his expertise in all aspects of leadership development and the creation of leadership training programs. In addition to being a lifelong student of leadership, Mike has earned master's degrees in business administration and management. He's also the author of 4 books devoted to the topics of leadership and leadership development. I can't wait for our guest to hear more about this. Mike, I am truly honored.
Oh, thank you so much. I am as well. And I think you mentioned it earlier. This is my passion. I love leadership. I'm still learning, but I love leadership, and I'm going to do this with the rest of my life. Just help leaders develop and maximize their potential. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, for leaders who say they're done and they know it all, I tell them, well, you have to relinquish your leadership crown because leadership is lifelong learning. You absolutely know that. And that's why our guests are listening here. So let's get right into this, Mike. My father gave a speech called The Price of Leadership many decades ago. And I'm sure you as a speaker, the number one topic people are craving for training and development on is leadership. So the first price that he said that a leader has to pay is loneliness. And we've all heard that saying, lonely is the head that wears the crown. But loneliness, means different things to different people. So could you unpack what loneliness means for you as a leader, and perhaps sometimes where you dealt with it throughout your career in the military or in the civilian sector, and some words of advisement you would give to our listeners?
Sure. I've read your dad's speech, which he turned into a book, and you've turned into a book. So I love it. I'm a big fan of your dad. That's how I reached out to you, Dr. Tracey. I saw it and I'm like, Tracey, tremendous. I saw it's gotta be his daughter. So thanks for that connection. But yeah, leadership can be lonely. And how I interpret that personally, what my experience has been, if you're an effective leader, you are going to have to make decisions that not everybody's going to agree with, or even see the rationale behind, the wisdom behind it, your decision at first. And that's when it can get lonely. A leader at every level of experience, I think, has to hold fast to his or her the courage of their convictions, and to know I've sought your input, I've made a decision, we're going this way, and to stand firm. I'm not talking about being a dictator, but to stand firm, and more often, and even in the face of criticism and rolling of the eyes and all that, we've all had that, we've all done that. Let's face it,
Right.
And we've all been the follower that didn't understand the decision the leader made until later, sometimes years later. When you're like, I really appreciate that gal more now than 10 years ago when she was my boss. So yeah, courage of the convictions. You know, if you're leading well in a challenging environment, there are going to be challenges, sometimes volatile challenges that options A, B, and C are all pretty close to each other, and they all might work, but for various reasons, you as the leader decide to go a certain way, and you got to stand fast. And so I tell people that to follow your moral compass as a leader, the leaders who follow their moral compass often feel lonely, but they never feel lost. They know. And so that true north, I'm big on metaphors and analogies and examples. You know, as you know, the true north, the earth turns and all that, the stars change and all that, but true north remains in the same position. And so we have to have a true north. And if you stick to your true north, at times it's going to be a lonely endeavor. And you have to have the courage of your convictions and hold fast because you know you're doing the right thing, not necessarily the correct thing, which the HR manual says the right thing. That's why we get paid the big bucks, so to speak.
Yes, I love that. And I was at a conference we were talking earlier in Boeing, and they said, well, what if decision making is such a mark of leadership, and we get paid the big bucks to make those decisions. And somebody said, well, what if there's several decisions that are all kind of very, very close? And I love that you put that. Then really, I would say your mission, your North Star, or your convictions do it. But I love that you put you can be lonely, but you're not lost, because sometimes that's
Right.
all you have is your convictions.
Right.
And tell me about it. Was there ever a time even in the military? Because I know sometimes people think, oh, you're in the military, you're following everybody and you're in this thing, but it even gets lonely in the military at times, does it not?
It absolutely does. And of course, there, unlike in the business world where, you know, profit is at stake and sales statistics and all that, in the military, you know, obviously, even in a training environment, lives are at stake.
Mm,
And of course, in combat, nobody argues with that. Everybody knows lives are at
right.
stake. But I've often found, 24 years as a Marine, enlisted and officer, I always found that the opportunity, the need to exercise moral courage, which comes with associated often with periods of loneliness, is more in peacetime. It's driving my Marines hard in training, so hard that they often wonder, why does it have to be this hard? And they never truly understand it until we get in combat and they say, you know, really, this, in some ways, this was easier than the training.
Right.
Right. But when you're pushing people hard and they're at peace and all of that, they're often, even Marines are often like, geez, do we have to
Mhm.
run this far? Do we have to stay this hot and tired all the time? And yes, the answer is yes, you do. And so I've had times in the Marines where my first sergeant or enlisted leaders would come to me, or junior officers, and say, sir, you know, you're all about combat readiness and training. We might want to let up. I mean, we're going awful hard. And sometimes they were right and I eased up, and other times I had the most experience and I would say, or a different set of experiences. And I'd say, I hear you. We're going to go a little bit further. And that's where you have to be right. You have to have the courage of your convictions. And to your point, Tracey, I want to go back and cover the person that asked you at the thing. Well, you know, sometimes there are several different options and they all seem right.
Mhm.
A little tidbit that I would offer on that is I offer leaders, you have to make decisions, but whenever your team leaders, your teammates offer a suggestion that is at least as good as yours, go with theirs. When
Mhm.
in doubt, go with their solution. If
I
your
like that.
solution is A, you favor A, but they come up with B, and B really will work, go with
Right.
B every time
Mhm.
because they love everybody. We all love being listened to and our advice and recommendations acted upon. So it's a golden opportunity for leaders, and I couldn't pass up that opportunity to express my views on that.
No, I love that. That's absolutely love being listened to, and even in the military.
Oh, yeah.
But what a way to make sure that you are like lonely because nobody wants to be around you. Like I said,
Right.
the buck stops with us. So by virtue of that, when heads are on the chopping block, it's just us. That's when we stand alone. But I love
Right.
that in the other times. But you're so right about peacetime, and that training for when the balloon goes up. The same thing in corporate America, and I know you know this. Your reputation is built one decision at a time. And
Yeah.
so you have to always be on point and hyper attentive to, hey, if I have to stand and do the right thing and not the popular thing or what, the profitable thing, even sometimes. I really love that you put that it is loneliness is going to hit you every day, but when you stay that, you're going to stay that because in the end, there is going to be a payoff and you're going to stand firm.
Yes, I agree with that. And one of the most recent examples that we both know about is COVID hit. And all of a sudden, literally the country shut down. We're not coming to work. And so the remote workforce was thrust upon a whole lot of non-believers. And I knew many of them. I was fortunate. I embraced it early on. And so I believed and I knew that this could work. And so did many others. I'm not anything unique in that regard. But I have a large following on LinkedIn. I post there almost every day. And I saw people saying, well, now that we're in COVID, we're all remote. It's a great opportunity to build a company's culture. And I opined, ladies and gentlemen, this is just Mike Ettore's opinion. It's too late. Mm-hmm. You are entering COVID with the culture that you've already created. And if you're saying now we're going to go remote, so now we really got to be good. We really got to be organized. We really have to have character, accuracy in reporting. It's too late. Can you catch up? Sure. But the old adage, you go to war with the unit you have, not the unit you would love to have. The equipment, the training, the integrity, the SOPs, and all of that. And so, early on when you were introducing me, I'll make this editorial comment. Marine leadership, C-suite leadership, no difference. And I maintain that I led civilians exactly like I led Marines with minuscule adaptation. And you have that experience, Trey, the military to the business world. People are people.
Right.
And as long as people don't, and many do, buy off on the stereotypical Rambo and Full Metal Jacket, and they think that's how I led them. No, it's not like that. Now, boot camp, there's a whole lot of yelling going on there. And I was a drill instructor when I was enlisted. So yes, I was a whole, you wouldn't want to know. I called that my savage phase. Aside from that, I have never seen anything in the corporate world even close to the amount of love and compassion from leader to led that I witnessed in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And I know the other services are no different. I loved Marines. I literally I'd punish them and
That's love.
Train the hell out. Yes, exactly.
Right. Rebuke is part of love, tough love. Right.
But I loved them. And
that
leads into my next statement. I think to be a good leader, you at least have to like people. You have to like it and know that they're going to be bringing you problems. Mm-hmm. To be an exceptional leader, I think you actually have to love people. You really have to love them to the point where the biggest thrill you ever get is seeing them do well and greatly eclipse your own accomplishments.
Oh, beautiful.
Which I've experienced so much now.
Right.
Yes.
That's so you talked about a basic premises as a leader is to know they're going to be bringing you problems. So that dovetails really nicely into the next price of leadership after loneliness, which is weariness. And, you are not only have the responsibilities of being a leader. So you've got different people responsibilities, you've got, regulations, you've got you're a publicly traded company. So you have, of course, your global transparency and your reputation, but you then have people bringing you problems. How do you deal with weariness as a leader when you have this responsibility put on you?
Yeah, I love that. And so I'll back up and preface it with this. I teach that there are two types of friction: external friction, COVID, couldn't do anything about it. COVID was thrust upon us. And then there is internal friction. So external, internal. Internal is often called self-imposed friction.
Yes.
So where I'm going with this, Tracey, is a leader is going to get very weary very quickly if he or she has not trained and delegated to their people. Mm-hmm. If that leader is doing 8 pounds of the 10 pounds of that unit's work, they're going to get tired very quickly. If they've learned to develop their teams and subordinate leaders, then they're actually maybe doing 2 pounds of it, supervising the rest of it, the accomplishment of the rest of it through their leaders, the classic officer NCO delegation, technique and all of that. Mm-hmm. So I'd say the first piece of advice is for a leader, especially new ones, the quicker you realize that you're not Nobody expects you to know everything. Nobody expects you to know it all. Nobody certainly expects you to do it all. And the quicker you realize that and deputize your people, and I go this way, this is how I've avoided it. I develop subordinate leaders by asking the 3 big questions. And I maintain that they produce the answers to almost all of an organization's ills. I tell my people when I first get there, I said, here's the deal. You have to trust me. I trust you. We have a culture of trust here. I'll never shoot the messenger, but I'm going to ask you 3 questions. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we do differently? And if they trust you, you can sit back and they will list 99% of the issues and friction points in that organization at every level.
Okay.
And then I tell them, if you're going to bring problems, you have to bring proposed solutions as well. And then finally, Tracey, as a C-level executive, I used to tell my leaders, it's going to sound harsh, I'll explain it. I used to tell my leaders, bring me problems, but don't bring me your problems. And they would look and I'd say, now let me explain.
Right.
I'm here for you. I'm here to help you. My main duty is to feed you and make you prosperous and successful, remove challenges, give you the best equipment, clear roadblocks. I'm here to help you solve problems. I'm not here to give you directions and advice on problems and issues that are well within your pay grade. You have to do that. And so I would just tell them, I say, they come to my office and I say, I got to be honest with you. I know the answer to this, or I think I at least have an answer for you, but this is not something that you're supposed to be coming to me for. So I want you to go back, reflect, come back to me tomorrow and bring me solutions, proposed solutions. I'll give you my opinion on the solution, but you're coming to me for, Mike, this happened. What should I do? I'm never going to do that. Unless you come to me and say, Mike, I've got this situation going on. I actually don't know what to do. I need your advice. My immediate response would be, Susan, I hear you. Have you consulted your colleagues? So in other words, before you come to me, have you leveraged the knowledge and experience and insights and recommendations within your team and across the organization with your colleagues? Because all of them are exponentially smarter and wiser than me. So it's a little bit of tough love.
Right.
Don't darken my doorstep with a problem that is yours to solve.
I love it.
And you have to stand firm. And so getting back to the original question, it preserved my ability to develop them. It's like when your mom and your dad, I'm sure at one point said, Tracey, get back out there and solve it. This is yours to solve. You know what I mean? And while I'm not dealing with children in the business world, the concept is the same.
Well, absolutely. So you, coming into the military, and we know a lot of who you're assigned is who you get. The beauty of the military is every couple of years you get transferred, so you're constantly getting a flux of new people. And then in K-Force, which is a bigger resource pool to pull from, how are you doing this as an entrepreneur with your business? Because I always the old decision making or critical thinking is never make a decision that you can delegate to your lieutenants. ... provided you have excellent lieutenants. Right. So how do you do that? Because a huge portion of our listenership, including moi, is an entrepreneur now, and I don't have a big talent pool to pull from. Yeah. Tell me how you do that with Fidelis Leadership Group.
Yeah, that's a great point. To your point, I teach that, don't bring me your problems and all that. Now that assumes that there's a level of infrastructure there and that you have somebody to delegate to.
Yes.
And I want to make sure, so I'll use the K-Force analogy. I was there almost 15 years as a C-suite executive. My direct reports, I generally had 3 to 5 direct reports. Most of them reported to me for over 10 years. Now, early on in the first few years, it was a lot of hands-on mentoring by Mike because they didn't know how to solve some problems. So when a problem issued or surfaced with Don and his department, I would get Don, Dustin, Susie, and Fred all together and say, Don's got this problem. What are you folks? And I turn it into a teachable moment. And so over the years, they got really good. And I'll be honest with you, Tracey, probably for the last 5 years of my 15 years, my biggest challenge was staying out of their way.
As it should be.
At that point, it was like, I make a joke. My biggest value add was getting them coffee and getting their offer early and turning the lights on. They were good. They were super good. And even better, they were just super good for me. When I left, they've all moved on to bigger and better things, operating at levels greater than I've ever operated on. So I'm just so thrilled for them. Early on, though, I had to train them up. Entrepreneurs, you often don't have that full staff. And so it's a monetary thing, a budget thing. And I would just say, get the critical stuff as soon as you can.
Okay.
But your job as an entrepreneur is the things that you're doing in year one that are necessary, and you're bootstrapping it, as you know. If you're still doing those things with 3 employees, and you're still doing those things when you've got 33 employees, something is wrong.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's brilliant, because sometimes we grow at different rates where we don't have 30. And so
right.
I love to delegate. Delegation, I dream of it. But, until as an entrepreneur, until you have the profitability that you can hire the best to start offloading this. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I get a lot as an entrepreneur. Well, if you're busy, you should just hire people. Well, okay, trust me, I understand leadership and contracting, government, state, private, and it's different when you're bootstrapping. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because a lot of our listeners are out there wondering, hey, when do I bring, how do I manage this workload? So I love that you said, if you're doing the same stuff when you had 3 as you do at 30, because that's a wonderful way to really quantify it and say something's amiss, versus I think it frustrates entrepreneurs to go, well, stop doing what you're doing. Then who's going to do it? Especially if you're a solopreneur, like a lot of our listeners.
Yes, exactly. And if you're a solo that intends to get wider, what I say is this is, so let's say the entrepreneur understands that. So I'm going to hire some people and delegate. I know you'll agree with this, Ray. I tell people leadership is all about humans, human nature. And the minute that one person adds just one other person to the equation, it now becomes a leadership situation.
Yes.
So entrepreneurs are usually very, very smart, and they've got a good product, and they're whip smart in some cases, sometimes like boil your brain smart, so smart. But I would encourage them to sit back and realize that nobody all of a sudden hit them on the head with the leadership stick and made them competent leaders. So hiring leaders and wanting to delegate to them is noble. Actually being competent at it is a skill that the entrepreneur must learn.
Right.
And I see entrepreneurs failing to recognize that. And so they do the right thing. Their staff grows, they want to grow, but they're terrible leaders, quite frankly. They're inefficient leaders. And that's why you see so many companies getting acquired. And the first big move is the entrepreneur is gone.
I love it. Yeah.
Because they can't scale leadership.
Can't scale. And again, like you said at the beginning, just because you're a leader, that is different than leadership. That's completely different. I can be a great leader of myself, but in leading others is completely different. So yeah, well, thank you for unpacking that. Because I know, like I said, people, like me and you are a huge portion of our listenership is transitioning, and with the goal of doing now with taking all the wonderful leadership lessons they've learned. But now you're doing this. I got a gentleman tomorrow. Today's his last day of working for somebody else, and now he's going off to do his own thing. So I know he's and he's a Marine too. So I know he's really going to love this. So
well, my last thought on this, my last piece of advice to entrepreneurs is, they all know that as they grow their business, learning contracting and learning accounts payable, they got to learn that stuff.
Right.
Best advice I can give you is leadership is a learned skill, and you have to learn it. Mike Ettore was formerly trained as a leader, as a young teenage Marine. I first in charge of people when I was 18 years old. I'm 66 years old. I retired as a C-level executive at 57. And I got to tell you, what I've learned from 57 to 66, Tracey, I sit there every week. I'm like, how did I not know this? How did I not see this? And so the journey is never over. They have to be at least cognizant that they have to start the journey. They have to start the journey. It's a conscious decision to start their leadership journey.
Mm-hmm. Outstanding, Mike. I love it. Okay. Loneliness, weariness. The next topic my father talked about was abandonment. And he talked about abandonment as what you need and ought to focus on rather than what you like and want to think about. And I can remember him telling me when I was a young lady, Tracey, he said, I do more in a day to contribute to my failure than my success. And of course, I'm looking at him like, are you kidding me? I can't, you're the most successful person I know. But he's like, nope. There's so much extra stuff, non-value added stuff in my life. And every day you have to abandon, you have to prune. So can you unpack, how do you stay really hyper focused? Even, the military, we got our orders, but even in the corporate world. And now, how do you really abandon the stuff? Because you're also growing and transitioning, you're relearning, you're unlearning. How's this work for you, Mike?
Yeah, I love it. And that is a learned skill as well. And I love you using the word prune. I use that quite a bit. So when I teach executives and leaders, I say, you have to prune the meeting tree every 6 months, or meetings grow. You have to prune the reports tree. You have to prune. And the tree, like a real bush, it grows, and sometimes the leaves start obscuring the path, and you gotta get out there with your clippers and shear them off and all of that. And so I would say one of the first things that a leader, and especially an entrepreneur, needs to know is self-awareness. Where are you spending your time? Mm-hmm. So as an executive coach, Tracey, I know you do the same thing. When I go in and I do coach senior executives, these are successful people by anybody's, standard. The first thing I do, and I say this publicly, the first thing I do with all clients, show me your schedule. They print out the weekly schedule, and they're usually very proud. See how busy I am? And I'm like, you are a C-level guy. That's not a C-level schedule. Oof. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I am in meetings from 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. I have some at 8 p.m. I said, right. Uh-huh. You're the only person, you and 4 or 5 other C-level guys are the only people formally tasked with looking beyond this year. Nobody else, the guy in the shipping dock, the IT guy, nobody else is charged formally with looking over the horizon. Where's this? What's the equipment you're going to use 3 years from now? So show me on the schedule, where is your feet on the desk contemplating and reflecting time? Where is that? And so where I'm going next. I put them through an exercise. I want you to go through and identify which meetings you really don't need to be at, which meetings you could go to every other week. And I tell people, be cognizant of every single thing you do. Now, I'm talking obviously at the executive level. These guys are making a lot of money, and gals, a lot of money, and they're not paying you to do PowerPoint presentations. They're paying you for your mind, your brain, your influence, your presence. Same thing with entrepreneurs. I would literally track everything I do. And can somebody else do it? And if you're an entrepreneur and that somebody else isn't there, you'll know that there's a certain point in time when it is time to hire that person. And so when I coach, Tracey, small companies, ascending companies that are actually doing well, I tell them it's time for you to make your 2 most important hires of this phase in your life cycle. And they're all like, well, what is that, Mike? And I say, you really need a bona fide, full-grown bear finance person. Right now, you've got an accountant who's admirable, doing a good job, but she doesn't have the CFO level acumen skill. And you're making money. So she doesn't know where to leverage the money and all. It's beyond her skill set. So you got to get a bona fide finance person. Mm-hmm. And this shocks them. And you need to get an executive assistant. Yes. And they're like, what? I said, executive assistant / ops assistant. Yes. And then from this point forward, shame on you if you and any of your leaders are actually banging out PowerPoint presentations, making plane reservations, ordering lunch. These are all important tasks that need to be done. And it's not like you're too good to do it.
Right.
But I'll describe what I'm saying so your listeners truly know it. I went through, of course, computers were new in the Marine Corps. I only had a computer in my last duty station, and I typed emails with all caps. Yeah, it was, that shift key, was too much for a grunt, And then at K-Force, of course, we had computers and all that. As I joined the business world in '99, I never learned PowerPoint. I went through a 15-year, by some people's standards, highly successful C-level career, never, ever knew how to make a PowerPoint presentation. Now, I caused hundreds of them to be made. And here's what I did. I would get computer paper, printer paper, and I would say slide one on the left up, and I'd draw. So I want these words, number two, these words. And then on my way into a meeting, Jessica, my executive assistant, would be there. I say, Jess, PowerPoint presentation. This is a presentation on IT to the CEO, IT proposals. She would take it. I got it, Mike. Well, she had the templates and all of that. So I'd go into an hour meeting. On the way out, she'd be like, she'd have the first draft, and it's a PowerPoint presentation printed out. I would go back to my desk, answer some emails, look at it and say, change this, do that. And on my way to the next meeting, I'd hand her it back. And so over the course of the day, I went from nothing to scribbling on a pieces of paper, to a PowerPoint presentation that was probably 90% done. Mm-hmm. Now I could send that presentation to other people. So hold that thought. I used to tell my subordinate leaders at the highest level, better not let me catch you. Better not let me catch you bending keys. I'm okay if you go in and change happy to glad. But if you're actually starting and creating it, and I'm seeing you traumatized over, I can't get this font size right, I'm going to be all over you. That's not what the corporation's paying you for. Mm-hmm. And so finance guy, executive assistant, ops assistant, whatever you want to call that person, they are worth their weight in gold, as you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beauty for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, they have a lot of fabulous virtual assistants now.
Well, I was going there. Mm-hmm. So Fidelis is just me. And I have an ops, a VP of ops, Nancy. And she makes me look good continuously. Mm-hmm. Former Marine as well. She was actually one of my students at one point, so I hired her husband into K-Force, and just a great person. The rest of it, graphics, modules, PDFs, bending electrons, all from Upwork. I love Upwork. I found really good people. Mm-hmm. To include, I do a lot of book summaries for my clients. I'll find a book, and I'm illustrating this for the listeners. Obviously, I'm finding a book. This is a good book. I can't get executives to read a 400-page book. Right. I especially can't ask them to do it before next week's session. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I have good writers. I say that book right there, 10,000 word book summary, an executive summary. Well, they know my format. We've talked. Sure enough, a week later, it's to Mike Ettore. So I pay them I got it. And I probably put 4 hours into it, Ettore sizing it. Mm-hmm. Send it to Nancy, who's, I'm not good with, I can write well, but semicolon, Nancy, you know what I mean? I'm just not good at that. Nancy blesses it, says it's good to go, Mike. Boom, go over to Upwork, formats it in a PDF module. Next thing you know, we have really a world-class book summary. And that I've just outsourced everything except me looking at it and saying, nah, I would say it this way. I would say it that way. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, I have found talent on Upwork. Yeah. That's just incredible. So I don't have, I guess I could, I'm doing well financially with the business, but it doesn't make sense for me to hire a full-time person that I'm only going to use for 3 or 4 hours a week.
I know. I couldn't agree more. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because you can find wonderful people on Upwork is one I use.
Unbelievable.
Fiverr for some of my more creative stuff, but Upwork is definitely on there. So we'll put the link in there too. Okay.
Yeah.
So loneliness, weariness, abandonment. Last one is vision, which Charles said is nothing more than seeing what needs to be done and doing it, because otherwise you're just writing stuff down. So talk to me about how do you hone and craft your vision? How do you ignite your vision? How do you vision cast?
Yes. Well, that's a big one on me, for me, trained as a Marine. So there is something that goes all the way back to Clausewitz, Napoleon, and the U.S. military has used something called the principles of war for over 100 years, and they're pretty standard among the services. And if you follow these principles, the operation usually has a good chance of going well. If you violate them, probably not going to do all that well. And the very first principle of war, which I now call the principle of business, is objective. What are you trying to accomplish? If you don't have that, you're just, I don't know if I can use any good analogies here. You're just punching in the dark. You're not going to hit anything.
Right.
And so on a personal level, if you check my website, it has Mike Ettore, and it's got my picture there, and it says my purpose. And you read that, if you read that those 2 or 3 paragraphs, you'll know what the purpose of my life is. It's to train leaders while I'm alive and after I'm gone. Yes. So after I'm gone implies I have to do, like your dad is still training leaders. He's still impacting people because he left things behind. And so in that aspect, I am emulating your dad and other old timers, so to speak. And I'm sure he was emulating him. He was emulating, really, we all emulate Socrates, the Stoics, the ancient guys that wrote things down. Because when it comes to the human condition, I find that these guys had it figured out 2,000 years ago.
Yes, they did.
That, 2,000 years ago, and include probably the first leadership tome ever written was the Bible.
Right.
If you look at it, there's not a hell of a lot of leadership situations that are not covered in that book. If you think about it, if you apply to it,
right.
They're talking about humans back then, human nature and all of that. So hopefully I gave you something. Get me back on track, though.
Oh, yeah. So the objective was, and I love, what are you trying to accomplish? And I love that you said the what word. We get a lot of this. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?
Yes.
And I frankly, like you, I was probably, if you don't know why you're showing up or why you're putting on the uniform, you shouldn't have said what are you trying to accomplish? Because it's like a flight plan. If you can't tell me what you want to do, and this as a coach, I can't help you get there. And most people really struggle with that because that takes a lot of introspection. So that was the first principle of war. What were the other 2?
Well, there's actually several of them, but what I'd like to reinforce is this. You're exactly right. We have something in the military called commander's intent. And the intent is the what. To your point, Tracey, nobody in a business, a company, a family, or whatever should ever wonder what the objective is.
Yes.
Objectives must be stated. And unless you absolutely have to, a leader should refrain from stating how.
Right.
Let your people come up creatively and do it. So that the analogy that I use in my book is, it's been mandated from above that the goal for the sales force is to include top line growth and gross profit. So go out and get us deals where there's more gross profit. Well, the regional manager is on vacation. The office manager is sick, and the salesperson is out on a client and has a deal right in front of her. And basically, it's like, you got to tell me if you're taking this deal right now. She can't call her office manager. The regional guy's out, but she knows the intent is to get deals that increase gross profit. So she commits the company. And when those 2 people come back from being sick and vacation, are like, yes. What they don't want to do is come back and hear her say, I had this deal,
right,
but you weren't there to give me permission. And they'd be like, no, Sarah, go for it. And so I ask in the book, I put a little guilt trip on people. Are your leaders, sales and non-sales, are they equipped? Are they empowered to accomplish the what? Have you empowered them? Or are they just sitting there waiting for explicit directions? Open the milk, pour it in a glass, drink it, go wash your glass. That's you're not going anywhere quickly at all.
Right.
And I know you deal a lot with entrepreneurs. I find a lot of entrepreneurs, because they haven't learned leadership and haven't learned the importance of delegation, that when they delegate, they often delegate and dictate.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what they are training is, they think they are training well, that what they are training is they're training robots
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
really they will respond to commands.
Mm-hmm.
That's bad. You
Right.
want people to say, I know what the intent, the vision. So we're saying vision and intent for the purpose of our discussion, same thing.
Right.
People should never wonder, wait a minute, what is it that they want my team, my department, my region, my company? What's our goal? What's the mission? And we agreed that we were going to do it this way, but that way is now on the ground level, out in the sales force, out in the business arena. It seems like Avenue A, it's not, the bridge is out. We just can't do it. But we can still accomplish the intent by going around and skirting around the issue. Never skirting ethics or character,
Right.
or laws, but get creative. And entrepreneurs, I find, are the most creative people in figuring out needs and developing products and systems and services, but they're often not all that attuned to engaging the creativity of their people in accomplishing the vision.
Mm-hmm.
So it all goes back to leadership is a learned skill, and everybody needs to accept the fact that they have to learn that skill.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It reminds me of my favorite Patton quote: never tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity.
Yeah, Patton had it. Yeah.
Yeah, he had it. He was
Yeah.
tough, man, but the expectation was message to Garcia. Whenever I ask people to do something and then they ask me 50 questions, I just hand them a little message to Garcia and I'm like, read this,
Yeah.
and then you can know what to do.
Yeah. And to your earlier point, Patton, great quote. But what that implies is that the leader that he's talking to has teammates that are competent and all of that.
That's why I keep going back to you again. In confident, and I think it was Patton too, or one of them said, always delegate to lieutenants, ... provided you have excellent lieutenants. And I gotta tell you, I'm sure everybody here would listening, I don't want to have to write a process for open the milk, get a glass, pour it in.
Right.
But yet a lot of people in the workforce now are like, well, and it's like, you have to get people with initiative too. Yes, we can set the intent, but then we're adults, we're thinking, we have this frontal global cortex, we have Google, we have everything. And so you just got to have people with the initiative. Because if I spend every day writing down policies, I'm not too big to fail. Okay. I am not going to be in business. So you got to be quick, especially for entrepreneurs. My lieutenants have to have that industriousness, that enterprising, and that I can figure it out. Because Mike, this isn't rocket science.
Nope.
Anybody can figure this out, but not if you're waiting to be told something.
Right. Well, the quality, I agree. The quality that you're describing, as I label it, is called bias for action.
Ooh, I love it.
Big Marine Corps warfighting term, bias for action. And we say from corporal all the way through the senior officer ranks.
Fabulous.
You have to have a bias for action. So when we train for combat, we simulate real combat conditions, and real combat conditions mean, guess what? The captain's not going to give you any instruction because the captain's dead.
Right.
And by the way, the radios don't work. Oh, and the bridge that we're going to go across is not there. Now, those situations in combat always happen. There's a mandate that, I think it might have been Patton, somebody said, no battle plan survives the first shot.
Yes.
And it's true. So you don't want a military leader out there facing that kind of uncertainty for the very first time in combat. So we train to it heavy. For example, going on nighttime raids in helicopters, it wasn't uncommon for our battalion commander to be there and surreptitiously kidnap a captain. So you come with me. Well, nobody knew the captain wasn't there. So the helicopters fly away, they land. Where the hell's the captain? And I saw that happen one time, and the unit just stayed there, paralyzed. The captain was back in the COC. He wanted to see, would the XO say, no, captain, I got it. Another time he put a unit out there, gave us missions, but then He gave them a mission to do something, block this bridge or something, knowing full well the bridge wasn't there. And they kept calling back for instructions, and he wouldn't answer them. And they just stayed there. 2 other units had similar nebulous, impossible missions. And despite the fact that they couldn't talk, received no instructions, they took action and did it right. And so he didn't chew anybody's throat out after that. He got us together. But Tracey, it was continuous in that unit. I was a lieutenant, continuous. He would always throw stuff in the game, so to speak, to the point where I was involved in the liberation of Grenada. And I'm flying in now. It's, combat experience, and flying in low level over the ocean pre-dawn. And I knew that I was the lead helicopter, going to be the lead helicopter for my company. And I was expecting to land in a large field, about 4 football fields large. And I was supposed to land, go secure the northeast corner. The rest of the company would come, and then another company, and we're going to start the operation. So I'm ready to go. We got this plan. We got no maps because there were no maps of it. No real communications. They fly us in treetops, and I'm looking out of the window. It's kind of like Apocalypse Now. I'm flying in, and I see palm trees coming up. Boom, he pops over the palm trees, starts landing and putting me and my Marines in the side of a soccer stadium, a fenced-in soccer stadium. And I'm like, no. It's like a shooting gallery. Like, no. And so I go up to the crew chief, like, no. And the squadron commander, very experienced guy, I knew who he was. He turned around and said, go. And so that we did, we honestly, so all I can say is my first thought was, come on, Colonel, not here. You're still playing with us? That was my first thought. My captain landed minutes later and said, Mike, do you have any idea where you're at? I said, I have no idea, sir. I don't know whether we're on the east side of the island, the west side of the island, the north side, or whatever. And so we figured it out. We did not just sit there and say, who's that? Now, that's kind of a dramatic example.
No.
But I would ask the people listening to this, are your people sitting out there because you're at lunch and they can't talk? Are they sitting there paralyzed in that soccer stadium, awaiting instructions? There were no instructions. I couldn't talk to anybody. The communications were out. So anyway, people like us, we face these decisions all the time. I'm sure you had similar stuff in the military where tasked to do something, generally agree that we're going to go down this route, and then that route is not tenable anymore. So it's up to Major Tracey, you know what I mean? And Captain Smith, figure it out.
Right. Well, I love that bias for action. Listen, it happens when I was out of the office for 2 days earlier in St. Louis this week. I'm not here. My day is maxed up. I've got things going on. And I love that everybody on the team has to have a bias for action. Yes. I love that. If I have to get involved, I don't want to get involved. Something's not right. And we've been, working together for years. So I just love that you put it. That's a great way. Okay. Oh, no, go ahead, Mike. Go.
And for one final qualifier, we say in the Marines, you have to have a bias for action, but that doesn't mean you run to your death.
Right.
So you have to have a bias for action. We've trained you. Yes. You know what the vision, the intent is. Use your judgment.
Yeah.
We risk Marines' lives. We don't gamble with Marines, because gamble means they either live or they die. Risk means we might take some casualties. So bias for action does not mean the entrepreneur just lets his people do whatever. Right. They use judgment, and they behave in a manner that still will accomplish the entrepreneur's overall intent, their mission.
Beautiful. I've heard it said, you stay on the leading edge, not the bleeding edge. We're in peacetime now. I'm an entrepreneur. Nobody should be falling on their sword or on a grenade. This is, so I love that. Okay. So we talked about loneliness, weariness, abandonment, and vision. We're going to open this up more. Any other leadership topics we have not hit on that you want to share? That's the first thing. And number 2, then I want to talk about these 4 books that you wrote. I want you to unpack them. So anything else from a leadership perspective while you have our listeners here that you would like to share?
Yes, I would go always back to the very first chapters of my book, the very first thing that I learned as a Marine leader, enlisted and officer, and that is the absolute non-negotiable requirement for character. And I have a famous quote on the wall of my gym here. It's by Heraclitus, an ancient Greek philosopher. It says, "A man's character is his fate."
Mhm.
And if you think about it, some people skate through life and they get caught cheating way at the end. Some people never do, but not most. Most people do succumb to what their character is, good
Right.
or bad, how it ends up. So I tell people, as a leader, you do not want an organization that has a zero defects mentality, with one exception: character.
Mm.
And within character, the subset of integrity. So I was taught as a Marine leader, we know you're going to make mistakes. You're young. However, we will tolerate no lapses of integrity. If you get caught lying, cheating, or stealing, you will be out of this operation. You'll be out of this outfit probably within 30 days. And I saw it happen.
Me too.
Now,
Honor code. Yeah,
some people say, "Oh, you can't do that in the business world." I disagree.
I agree.
In my company, it was a highly ethical company. And this will be a bold statement to some of the military folks out there. K-Force was led by a CEO and a team of executives that had identical emphasis on character, integrity, honesty, accuracy, and reporting than the Marine Corps.
Mhm.
And I saw a few times during my tenure at K-Force, senior executive or the leading salesperson. This guy himself's making seven figures. He's bringing in tons of revenue. But they did something that violated our core values. And I tell you that the company adopted some Marine terms, and we'd be in an executive team meeting and someone would say, "I have an announcement. Charlie Smith is no longer with the firm. I was proven to be guilty of a lapse of special trust and confidence, breach of integrity." And we may never find out what exactly happened or whatever. He
Right.
got caught stealing or whatever the case may be. So I think that, as I always say, as goes the leader, so goes the unit.
Mhm.
Always, always, always. And as you know, in a publicly traded company, the auditors come in every quarter. It's the damnedest thing. It used to really piss me off, when I first got out there, Tracy. It was like, wait a minute, the auditors are coming in. We have to bring them in. It's an SEC regulation. They have to come in to make sure that we're not lying about what the business is doing. It's like, yes, that's exactly right, Mike. Because unfortunately, in the past, people did lie.
Mhm.
So to protect the shareholders, say, well, guess what? Now you have to spend all this money bringing in
I know.
Ernst and Young. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I understand. And so but they always come in about twice a year to do a high level audit. And one of the things that they ask is about tone from the top. And so they asked me, Mike, you're a senior executive. To the best of your knowledge, would the senior executives or any leader in this company tolerate cheating, stealing, obfuscation of the truth or whatever? And I'd say, no, I don't even suspect that going on. Well, they didn't stop there. They went all the way down the chain of command. I mean, down to the mailroom, the shipping dock. They would cherry pick people and say, you ever get the impression, like Wells Fargo, like, just sign these people up, Volkswagen, make the emission stats work and all that. And so, and in those companies that are found guilty of those things, it came from the top.
Mm-hmm.
They either encouraged or they tolerated fudging the Enron, collusion.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah. Well, we had that, the honor code was in the military academies was we will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's still there or not, because it's like, oh, it's just, no, but character is a shared, like leadership it is shared. But you brought up one of my favorite books is by John Maxwell, and it's called There's No Such Thing as Business Ethics. And his point is ethics is ethics is ethics, be it spiritual, financial, there's no character is character. And it's your core conviction. You can't separate it. And if your character has a malformation, it's coming out. And it can't, like you said, it has no place in the organization, because if the leaders at the top tolerate it, and boy, look at this stuff, look at all this stuff going on. It's like, oh my gosh. But you know what? I can't look at what anybody else is doing. All we know is that we hold ourselves to a high level of integrity. But I love the zero defect on character.
It has to be that
It does
way,
have to be. Right.
especially with the entrepreneurs listening right now, because I tell people, whether they realize it or not, any organization, again, the minute there's another person, it's a leadership environment. And whether they are consciously doing it or not, a culture is being formed.
Yes.
A culture is being formed. Everything. So the leader has to lead by example in everything that she says, does, encourages, and tolerates. And those things produce standards. Like, we can get away with this here. She tolerates that. Those standards become the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So one way or the other, a company, an organization has a culture. It just may not be what the leader would hope it to be. Cultures do grow automatically, unlike a lot of people. Well, it won't grow on trees. Well, guess what? I say cultures do grow on trees. Bad cultures, the vacuum will be filled. If you don't create and groom and cultivate a good culture, a less than good culture is sure to surface. It's human nature.
Well, and it's all, an organization is neither good nor bad. It's amoral. It's the individuals in the entity.
Yeah.
And like you said, that's all characters. So you can, that, and that's what becomes the culture, because if it's not something living, breathing, which is us, like a program doesn't have a culture, money doesn't have a culture, but us individuals. So I really love that you kind of unpack that and tied culture to character. And when you tell people how's the character, because everybody likes to say, oh, my culture is this, that, and we're the great. How's your character? Ooh, that gets personal.
Yeah.
That's where we really get into morals and ethics and decision making. And how are you when nobody's, that gets into, when you go in for your security clearances and they ask you about, I can remember one time I went in and they said, have you ever broken the law? And I'm like, I'm a rule abider. I'm like, of course not. And they're like, so never went over the speed limit, never ran a stop sign. I'm like, oh, those laws. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So, but it's the little white things that all, go back into that. I'll go back into that character bucket. So, okay, Mike, tell me about your books. Tell our listeners about your books.
So my main book is called Trust-Based Leadership and Marine Corps Leadership Concepts for Today's Business Leaders. It's a big book, 574 pages. And I wrote that as a textbook for my leadership coaching, executive coaching, leadership. I do a lot of leadership training of executive teams and leaders at all levels. And the premise behind it, to my earlier statement, Tracey, is I joined the business world in '99. I joined a publicly traded company. I didn't know what a publicly traded company was. At one point, they said, "Mike, we're gonna put AP. You're gonna take over AP." I'm like, what's AP? I didn't know what accounts payable was. I didn't know any. They made me at 2 years in. I became the CIO. It was 174 person technology group, $45 million budget, failing group. I had no formal skills in tech, but I knew it was going to work because they didn't need tech skills. They needed leadership and organization. And so the whole premise of the book is leadership is leadership. And I learned, so I was new to the business world. I was not new to leadership. Mm-hmm. And I looked to my left and right very quickly and realized I've had much more formal leadership training than anybody here. And there are some good executives and leaders here that are very good leaders. There are also some, through no fault of their own, that don't know the fundamentals. And so that's a different issue. That's a training issue. But I realized, while I could apologize for my lack, so at 4 or 5 years in, I was in charge of human resources, marketing, internet operations, order to cash, big group. We probably processed $20 million a day and payables and all of that. Basically, all of the non-sales, most of the non-sales organizations, units in a $1.3 billion company. I had training and experience in none of them. And we did well because they didn't need me to be a marketer. We had people down there that had the expertise. What I was able to do was lead, synergize, make them cohesive, make sure the vision was stated and they all were aware of it. Just lead the executive mindset. versus the person turning the wrench.
Mm.
My job was to make sure everybody had the wrenches, the right wrenches, we're turning the wrenches on the right things in every department, and that we're going to end up with the car we ordered at the end of the process. And by the way, what kind of wrenches are we going to be using 3 years from now? The mechanics are too busy turning wrenches. They don't have time to do that. So I'm very big on that. And of course, the entrepreneurs have to be very, very careful about this, because they don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the infrastructure. So anyway, that's the big book. If people want it, it's on Amazon, Trust-Based Leadership. They can Google me. I'm all over leadership presence. It's a big book. It's not meant to be read from cover to cover. You can go through and skip around and all of that, but it has served me admirably in my training and coaching, really admirably. And then I wrote one called Principles of War for Corporate America. And so I call it, here's why this military operation worked or failed. And here's why GE blew it, and Netflix and things like that, Blockbuster. And so if you follow these, and so I make the connection. And then I tell them, if you follow these principles, you have a real good chance of being successful. And because you're human, if you're successful, before you know it, you might fall victim to the next book, Victory Disease. Victory Disease, why great nations, armies, and companies fail. Mm. And so when's the last time you saw a Sears store? You haven't. They're gone. Kmart, there's so many good ones that are gone. GE, off of the Dow and just, the Dow. I mean, so you get my point. So I say this, the triad is, if you read the book, you got a chance at spiffing up your leadership. If you lead well and follow the principles of business, you have a chance of your operations going well. But then you might get arrogant and complacent and catch victory disease. So read them all and triangulate. And then the fourth book, I am a huge fan. I alluded to it. I'm a huge fan of the Stoics, the ancient philosophers. Oh. And so Tracey, they really did have it figured out.
They did.
Thousands of years ago.
Well, I sent an e-blast out today about for my father, and somebody, Jerry Balloon, if you probably listen to this, and he's like, you and your father were both Stoics. And I'm like, oh, I forgot. I love that. To unpack that for the listeners, what the Stoic is.
So the Stoics, there was literally a group of philosophers, mostly Greeks, some Romans, Marcus Aurelius, Socrates, and all that. And they go back from 2,500 years ago, a couple older than that, to 200 or 300 AD. And so these are the old wise guys, I call them, the old wise men. And they figured it out. And so I became a fan. I was a young Marine, and I saw an article on Admiral Stockdale. And Admiral Stockdale had been a POW in the infamous Hanoi Hilton for 7 years.
Right.
And he was in solitary confinement for almost 7 years.
Yeah.
And they physically broke him, but they never mentally broke him. Now, prior to going to Vietnam, he was a very learned guy, and he became a fan of the Stoics. He said it was on my nightstand. I used to read it. I embraced it. He gets shot down, and he says on the way down in his parachute, he's wounded. He's in his ejection sheet going down. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, Tracey, he said something like, into the world of Marcus Aurelius for at least 5 years. He knew, I am going to get tortured. This is not going to be fun, because he ejected in North Vietnam. This is going to be hell. And I'm going to get through this through the teachings and the wisdom of these guys. And so he survived. And I read about this. He said he got interviewed by a famous leadership author. And he said, well, tell me, Admiral, who survived the Hanoi Hilton? And he goes, well, that's a little bit complicated. I can tell you who didn't survive. The optimists. And the guy was like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not what I expected you to say. The optimists would survive. And he said, let me tell you why they didn't survive. We were getting brutally tortured. They broke my arms. He still couldn't walk right when he was released, his shoulders. They tortured the hell out of these guys, hung them up by their arms backwards, just brutal, inhuman. And he said, the guys that said, we're going to be home by Christmas. We're going to be home by Christmas. And then Christmas came and went.
Right.
It's like Easter, Easter. And he said, after a couple years of that, some of them were so brokenhearted that they died.
Right.
They just, he said, now, here's what became known as the Stockdale principle. He said, I took a different view and I taught others this view. And he said, I would tell myself, you're going to get out of this. You're going to see your wife and children again. You're going to be free again one day, but not today. Today and tomorrow, you're probably going to get tortured, starved, beat, whatever. It's there, but I'm under no illusion that it's going to happen soon. And he said, I had faith it was going to happen, but I also knew I got work to do. I have to live. My mission is to live to reach that. And that became the Stockdale principle. And so I read that as a young guy and fell in love with it and actually read his books and all of that. So the book that I wrote called Ancient Wisdom, what I did was, I have a large following on LinkedIn. I went out and I posted 100 days in a row. I posted a Stoic quote. And then for what it's worth, Mike Ettore's insights on it. And then after 100 days, I took them, packaged them in a book. And really, I say in the preface of it, I wrote this book for my children and my great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren. I don't have any great-grandchildren yet. I only have 2 grandchildren. They're 10 and 8. But my point is, I told my kids, if you read this book and what I say about these things, you get an inside look at how the old man's mind works. And maybe some of the things I did, said, caused you to do, hard on you as children, kind of make sense one day. You know what I mean? And so I'll leave it at this with the Stoics. And my advice to leaders at every level with the Stoics and everything is, I maintain, Tracey, that as an old guy now, every mistake that I've made, personally, professionally, and every mistake that anybody could make as a person and as a leader has already been made countless times by millions of people, sometimes for thousands of years. And all we have to do is read and talk to others and mine their experiences, and we can avoid repeating easily avoidable mistakes. Because when I read the Stoics, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I knew that 20 years ago. And relationships, business, life, whatever. They've got it figured out. There's a saying, a quote, some guidance for everything, which tells me what they went through as human beings is no different than what I'm going through. The world is much different. But when you deal with people and life's problems and getting, disillusioned and things like that, they've got all the answers right there. So that's pretty much it.
I love it. Well, and today a lot of people are like, oh, it's your AQ, your adversity quotient. So the importance now of resiliency. And one of my top 10 books is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which is very,
awesome.
very similar to, even if you're in the hell of a concentration camp, you will find a way to live. Otherwise, you won't make it. And why did he make it? And some of the other guys, a lot didn't, when they were under that. So
it's all about perspective. And I would encourage people to do hard things, personally and professionally, get used to dealing with adversity and or challenges, because eventually you're going to have them for real. And like I said about the combat Marine, the first time he gets tired, sore, scared, whatever, should not be for real. He should have felt that in training and all of that.
Right.
So I'm a big advocate of people pushing themselves physically, working out. And I'll say this, you've worked, I'd be curious if your experience is the same way, Tracey. I deal with high-level executives, and I don't think I've ever met one that was grossly overweight.
Right.
Or was an alcoholic. In other words,
right.
High achievers.
You got to be in fighting form. Right.
Yes. The
in
people
all
that
aspects.
They're usually, my executive team, all state college grads, nobody from a pedigreed school, so to speak, very accomplished people, different age group, but every single one of them exercised. Most of them in the morning before the day started. They were disciplined in what they ate. They were just disciplined in life.
Right.
So there's common denominators here that I tell people, and I think your dad said it and other people said it. People that are not disciplined in their personal lives are rarely disciplined and successful in their professional lives. Two go hand in hand.
They do. Which
Yeah.
brings me to another one of my favorite quotes from our contrails in the Air Force. If you can't, it may have been Patton again, if you can't get them to salute when you tell them to salute or wear the clothes you tell them to wear, how are you going to get them to die for their country?
Yeah.
So if you can't control physically something like your appetite, how are you going to be able, when the pressure's on, to make those big decisions? And
Yes.
yeah, the devil's in the details.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that goes back to what I'm saying. Leader leads by example in everything she says, does, encourages, or tolerates. For example, we had hard times during the dot-com crash in K-Force. We used to have our executive meetings on Friday, and it was an all-day meeting, so they would bring in lunch. Now, it wasn't a catered lunch that GE executives probably had, but it was a catered lunch. There would be chicken and whatever, tacos or whatever. Well, we had to cut back the whole company. And I mean, we cut back big time in the whole company. We were telling people, like, use the back of your paper, scratch paper and all that. Well, as executives, we had to lead the way. And so we stopped those lunches. And then when we started again, they were just sandwiches. And, people asked, they would come up and ask the executives eating lunch.
Right.
Actually, they eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That's what they're eating today. And I have a thing in my book where I wanted to lead by example. We were so tight on money that I used to use these pens. Now, the pen, we bought them in bulk. They might have cost 87 cents a piece, but I made a big deal out of it. For about 3 years, I didn't buy new pens. I'd made Jessica buy me refills for the pens.
Oh, yes.
And I saved 25 cents. And I told everybody that would listen,
Right.
I've had this pen for 3 years. I've refilled it 8 times. And so I'm leading by example. And so people, when they see the leaders, when you say tighten your belts, they damn sure better see the leader tighten their belt as well. Or you've set up hypocrisy and all is lost.
Set up hypocrisy. And all is lost. I love it. Okay. So now, Mike, I'm going to put all your contact information. What's the best way for people to reach out and stay connected with you?
Probably the best way. Well, my website has all my contact info.
Okay.
And I mentioned it before, I have a large following on LinkedIn. And for those that don't know this, LinkedIn has turned into a world-class social media platform.
Yeah, agreed.
You can get, and there are world-class people like you on there daily sharing insights.
Love it.
And so I am pissed, Tracey, that when I was young, LinkedIn and YouTube didn't exist. Because between LinkedIn and YouTube, I mean, there's the knowledge of the world is at your fingertips.
I know everything.
Yes. So LinkedIn, come find me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me and you'll get every post that I make. And I usually make it every week, every day. I have a podcast, Fidelis Leadership Podcast, once a week where I interviewed you and other notables. So really, if they just Google Mike Ettore, I'm a leadership guy. I've been out there for years. They have every right to say, I don't know if this guy's any good, but he's been around a long time. So
well, that says a lot. Hey, so you have your books, you have your courses. Say I'm not a C-suite person, but who's your ideal client out there? Because we have a lot of people. Do you coach individually? Can they do online stuff?
Yes.
What if they're just, not with a bigger organization, but can they reach out to you for your services?
They can. Yes. So I do coach. I do I have a couple executive coaching engagements right now where it's just one executive from a company, another executive from another company. Those usually 6 weeks at a time. Most of them sign up for another 6 weeks. Right now I am doing leadership training with 2 leadership teams, 6 people in one company, 12 people from another. And that is a 10-week leadership course using trust-based leadership. And both of those groups are the second group from their respective companies. I did their executives first. They said, we want you to do the next level. And one company said, you're going to do another 3rd level for us.
Oh,
so that answers the question that, yes, I train executives, but I train leaders at every level. And I really like to get the young ones because I tell people, if I can get to you in your 20s and 30s, you won't need an executive coach in a remedial sense when you're in your 50s and 60s. You'll need one that can help you get better, but you won't need one to save your job, you know? And so that's me being a bit of a smart ass, but yes,
No, it's true.
reach out
Yeah.
to me. And what I'm going to right now, I don't do the online stuff yet. I'm going there. What I'm going to start doing is start opening up a quarterly class to where if you want to get this trust-based leadership 10-week course, here's when it is. I'll put it on LinkedIn and I'll probably cap it at 12 or 10 or 12 people, have the website and all that. You come, you find out, you sign up for it, and okay, here's a Zoom invitation. Let's go.
Mhm.
And we go. And then when I say
That would be awesome. And, I'm just saying for online courses, I have found, yes, I do online courses because everybody says do online courses, but people still want the interactive portion.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can still have the recurring stuff or study ahead, but
Yeah.
they want that connection. And especially with somebody like you, yeah, I'm not saying go do it, but, I look forward to
Yeah.
those quarterly classes. I think that would be brilliant. I need to talk to you about a couple upcoming military gigs I got coming and
Yeah.
you on panels and stuff like that too.
I love it. Yeah.
I love
Yes.
it. All right, Mike, anything else? Any party words of wisdom?
No, I can't think of any. We talked about a lot today,
Oh,
and I just love it. I don't know how long we've been going a long time. I think you said a half hour. We've been going a lot more than a half hour, but I think you love it. I mean, my
I love
screen.
it. Listen, I got so much written.
Yeah.
I've got events coming up. I'm speaking next week, and I'm like, oh, I'm lifting that. I'm lifting that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I know our leaders out there will just be so thankful for this.
Yeah.
You're just a wealth of knowledge, Mike. So just thank you
Yeah.
so much. This will go out. We'll have all Mike's contact information out there, but
Yeah.
I just thank you.
Well, I would say this. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Usually in that 10-week course, and I've done many of them now, after about the fourth session, and in the fourth session, usually toward the end, I get all excited and I'm like, I'll stop. I said, let me ask you something. They're all looking at me on Zoom. I said, can you folks tell how much I love doing this? And yes, I'm like, I feel bad about charging you. I love this so much. I said, I would do it for free. It's not free, but I thank you. I love doing this. This is my whole reason for being on earth at this point in my life. And so thank you for giving me another opportunity. My great grandchildren's grandchildren are going to see this episode on whatever the internet looks like 100 years from now. They're going to see us.
Well, I'm so thankful because I know you are just going to be a tremendous resource to our listeners out there. So let me wrap it up real quick, Mike. And again, to our listeners out there, thank you for being a part of our tremendous tribe. If you like what you heard, please be sure and hit the subscribe button. We'd love it if you'd share, connect with Mike, get his books, and also the honor of a 5-star review would be absolutely tremendous. And I want to thank you all out there for paying the price of leadership. I think you got some insights and information here that we're in there in the battle with you. Keep up the tremendous fight. And thank you all for being a part of our lives. Have a tremendous rest of the day.
Thank you for listening to Tremendous Leadership with Dr. Tracey Jones. Find out more about Dr. Jones at www.tremendousleadership.com. If you've been ignited by something you heard in this episode, let us know by leaving a review for Tremendous Leadership wherever you listen to podcasts, or by sending us a message through www.tremendousleadership.com.